And welcome back to another Thursday evening edition of Ridgecrest Talk. We're continuing our conversation with Lorelei Oviatt. I kind of put her in a difficult position. I suggested on air, and what could she do but accept? But she would have accepted anyway. She's a wonderful person. So we're continuing the conversation about water, about the supervisors meeting here yesterday, and whenever this airs, it could be more distant in the past. But right. Anyway, we were discussing a well moratorium.
Right.
And I was just curious, how tailored or specific could that be? Does it have to be just a no more wells for during this period? Or can it be no more wells larger than this size, no more wells relative to commercial ag? How specific do you think that they could be?
Well, this was part of the referral on May 13th that we were just talking about, that board hearing.
Yes.
That said, on May 19th, Lorelei, when you bring back the Indian Wells Valley Land Management Plan for our final consideration, add a discussion about a well moratorium. So no one's going to see an agenda item that says well moratorium. I just want to be clear with people. It's going to be all in that same conversation. I think I think that I would defer to my counsel is not here, but my understanding is that you can tailor it to size of well. Tailoring it to a particular use is more difficult.
Okay, but
so size is easier.
Cover.
So a commercial well has a particular size casing. It's not necessarily how deep it is, but the casing, and that's what makes it a commercial well that has different standards and pumps more water than a domestic well like you get for your residence.
Right.
So we could say that residential wells were fine, but commercial wells were stopped. We could say that if you're deepening in a well, it's fine. We could say if you're replacing a well that's failed, it's fine.
If you're redoing the well casing, that would be fine.
Yeah. So you could tailor it to...
You couldn't limit the amount of water they're pumping or anything?
That's correct. The board could limit the amount of water, but that wasn't part of the referral. I think their sense is that the Groundwater Sustainability Agency may want to do that. But they do have the power to do that.
But if we talked about the size of the well, clearly you can't pump a large amount of water from a small well.
Right.
So the only reason for putting in a big well is if you're going to pump a lot of water because you need a lot of water.
For some use.
For some use, whatever that is.
So that would have the same impact as the rezone.
And if somebody had some ag land that could be used commercial,
right,
that wouldn't prevent, that's undeveloped right now, that wouldn't prevent them from coming in, building a house and putting it in a residential well for the time being.
That's correct, if that's the direction the board goes, but you're absolutely correct for that.
So it just seems to me that this is a much more gentle approach. And I have to confess, I was adamantly against the thought of a well moratorium. Through this discussion and listening to many people relative to the water situation, I've changed my mind. And I think that is a much better approach in that it's temporary, may turn into permanent, whatever, but it gives many points of review. And
I like it because it addresses the real issue here. Is water.
But let me give you some other things to think about. So one of the things that's going to have to be thought about is I know of no touchier issue than people's water rights.
Yes.
And no touchier issue than, is someone going to put a meter on and tell me how much I can pump? So by proposing a well moratorium, many people will have the same complaint, which is this is just the first step.
But
and
the
next
GSAs are going to be able to do that.
Well, I understand, but the county board is part of the GSA. So I am, I cannot, what's the word I'm looking for? When you go to a horse race and you say who's going to win. What do they call that?
Win, place, and show?
Yeah, no? I can't say what's going to happen with this. Okay, my experience as a planner tells me that there are a lot of moving parts to this conversation. Some people who weren't against, I want to be honest with you, that there are many large ag owners here who own. Remember, there's only 1,071 owners, not only, but out of all the thousands of owners, controlling 22,000 acres of property. So some of those people are controlling 2,000 or 3,000 acres. They were not opposed to me rezoning their property and recommending that. So the large ag owners were not opposed to that. They did not put letters in the record opposing it, and they were fine with it. They may have a different opinion about a well moratorium. So what you may end up with in this, looking objectively at it, is people who weren't engaged in this opposition may suddenly be engaged. And so the people who, this is just my experience as a planner, is that it's not as clear anymore who might be against it and who might be for it.
Okay,
so it's just a moving rock. It's moving.
Could not the board
parts.
table? You said they can break down the land management plan.
Sure,
and
they
parts
could.
of
They could table the rezoning.
and they
sure.
could table the part about rezoning
That's
property.
correct. That's right.
Until they look at this well
Absolutely.
moratorium.
They could. My only point is that the interest in the rest of the county.
The what?
The interest in the rest of the county, the Agricultural Farm Bureau and others in the valley portion, were not as concerned about the rezone as they would be concerned about a well moratorium. So there's going to be other people bringing opinions forward that the board will listen to, because we're going to listen to everybody.
Okay, but
So I think it's a fascinating experience, though, for everyone who hasn't been through a planning process.
Yes,
that
sure.
This is exactly what we want to have happen. You bring forward ideas, but I would not make assumptions about how the
Outcome.
for and against are going to.
I wouldn't.
I thought it was interesting that your mind was changed, though. I feel like that environmental impact report and all of this work is worth it. It's really worth it, even if it's not approved, because it created a forum for this community to have a different kind of discussion
right
about this crisis. And it is a crisis. I'm not ashamed to say that this is a crisis. It might be a crisis of confidence, but it's a crisis of something.
Well, okay. I wrote an article and it said there's not a water crisis. There's certainly a water concern, and we need to do something. And if nothing else, this has put the impetus behind doing something.
Right.
Because there's always been a debate.
Yes.
Ever since I moved here.
I've worked in this community for 20 years, and I've heard
We got
this
plenty
debate.
of water. We're running
right.
out of water. So it's
But
Exactly right.
I want to ask you to stay for at least one more segment, because I want to talk with you about more relative to your insight of how a well moratorium could be tailored so that the negative reaction that you just referred to maybe can be averted.
so when we come back,
we'll
talk to Lorelei Oviatt about the well moratorium. Join us when we come back. Welcome back. This is the last segment, I think, we're going to have with Lorelei Oviatt, unless Robert comes up with another idea. We're talking about well moratoriums. And one question I had before you get to yours is,
sure.
Okay.
If this were to be considered, would it be applicable to just this area, or would it be a county-wide?
Right now, the discussion is only for the Indian Wells Valley Basin.
Okay.
But it would be the first time we've ever done this in the history of the county.
Well, it only makes sense, because I've heard people say, well, that you have to do it county-wide if you're going to do an ordinance like that.
No.
But it doesn't make any sense when
You
you
don't
got somebody
have to
over
do
here
an
doesn't have any problem at all with their groundwater, and somebody over here that's in, serious overdraft.
Well, the valley is in serious overdraft too, and you're right, there's other parts of the county that aren't.
But even the supervisors talked about last night that even if they do address it over there, it'll be a completely different discussion process than what was done here.
Well, that was for the zoning.
Yes,
Right,
for the
right,
That was for the zoning rules. So the question, I believe that your question revolves around, how specific can you make this? You could make it specific to the Indian Wells Valley Basin only.
Okay.
And
That's
how much
good.
leeway do you have? I think the issue becomes, is it an over-the-counter permit, which makes it ministerial, which means you go down a checklist, or is there some discretion? And if there's discretion, it brings up issues of, are we going to have a public hearing on it? Does the public get to decide? Because perhaps, if the county says, I agree with your information you gave me, and I'm going to let you get another well, but I don't agree with Lorelei's information as a citizen, then I can call foul.
Yes.
Because I don't have access to that. So now you're talking about discretion. And as soon as you talk about discretion, meaning you can say yes or no, you trigger that crazy California law, the California Environmental Quality Act. And then we have to do an environmental review. We have to have a whole series of public conversations about it. I think the direction that the board would probably hope to go is more ministerial. Here's a checklist. You meet these qualifications, you get a well. You don't get a well.
And I think that
Because I think that's fair.
Yes.
Otherwise, you got to pay a lot of money too. We'd have to up the fees. We'd have to up the. But I'm just speculating here. But that's normally the board's direction is, as you all know, the things you love most. Get rid of regulations and streamline them.
Yes.
That is the board's direction to me, Lorelei. Is what's the least impactful way we can do this? Not the Rube Goldberg.
Yes.
Put every bell and whistle Berkeley way, okay, which is what Berkeley does. So,
In other words,
those are good. That's good thinking. That's the kind of discussion we'll have on Tuesday.
You could have within
May
that
19th.
within that administrative process is this a well which is going to be servicing new ag land.
Or is it going to replace the well? Are
Right.
you going to get rid of another well? I don't know. That's very good thinking, though. I didn't think about that.
And
in
then
the
we
mix.
could accomplish the goal of not having any serious degree of new ag come in.
Okay.
But we're not going to punish the existing ag. My words, my view.
Your words.
Yeah, I'm not saying that.
But I appreciate that. They're your words.
So that we all, recognize that there are people who want to do ag in this valley, and there are people who would just as soon have all the ag go away. It seems to me that
That's a good point.
the path that your department has gone down, and that is helping it not be that you're going to put ag out of business,
Right.
and any of that, and this would go along with that,
Okay.
and yet it would satisfy all of the people's concern that we're going to get to a point where ag's going to pump us dry.
Right, and then we're also address the concern that we have this other thing we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be working on a groundwater sustainability agency and a
Yes.
plan. So people's concern is this is premature.
Yes.
That's the concern.
Right.
So the question now is, and I think that is a good way of putting it, is there a half measure that we can put into place for a couple of years
Right.
to keep, because I just want to be clear, most of the conversations I'm having about new ag are not coming from the existing ag. They're coming from out-of-towners. So these would be out-of-towners who don't have the same sensitivity to the limitations and resources here, who want to profit by
Yes. And
less
Right.
expensive land, and I just pump the water out of the ground. And they may have other motives, as I noted last night. They may want to just mine the water and then prove
Yes.
up they have water, and then they
Right,
get to,
right.
No,
and that is the free market. But at the
Yes.
same time, people who live here should have some say in what happens. You live in a
Sure.
community, you invest in community, you build a business, you buy. Don't those people have some kind of little higher rights of saying what's happening to my community than someone who just shows up tomorrow? You may say no, but I say that's why it's a great democratic process, because they still have access to the conversation. It's still a conversation.
It's a conversation.
It's a conversation.
And
Give you that.
if
Right?
somebody
It's a
was
conversation.
if somebody was capitalistic, smart enough to come in here, get ag land, and then quote mine the water, but it didn't leave this valley, well, I don't know that
Good
that
question. And besides, and by the way, I am perfectly fine with people using the rules to their advantage. I mean, how can you survive in America if you can't use the rules to your advantage?
Right.
There's so
So-
many darn rules. If you're smart enough to figure out how to get around the rules, I say good for you. It's the American way.
Right.
That's right.
Legally.
Legally.
Legally
Right,
get
right,
around the
right,
rules.
yeah.
Sorry, legally get around the rules.
And I know that we've had extensive conversation with a pistachio grower out there who said, I'm going to get to the point where my profits are so great, I need to do something with that money besides give it to the federal government
That's
in
right.
taxes.
That's right.
So if I can help this valley
That's
get
exactly
additional
right.
water, and I know Rod has said the same thing. That's another
Very smart
pistachio
people,
grower
right.
that they are not our enemies.
That's correct.
They can definitely be our
And those are the
friends.
They're
people
part of the
the future
solution.
GSA should be talking to.
That's exactly right. And they're part, because fundamentally, this valley is going to have to face the number one issue when it comes to water, which is money.
Yes.
Water and money. Those
Water
are the
and
two
money.
things. I always say to people, they go, well, isn't there all those environmental issues? I go, no, it's water and money, okay?
Yes.
Those who have the money get the water, okay? That's the way it works right now in California. So that's
Well,
difficult. We have a very small tax base here,
Yeah.
right? We're completely surrounded by BLM land, so it's
Yes.
not like you can expand and attract. You know, you have all this federal, and it's great to have a federal partner, but that doesn't
Wow,
necessarily mean
we're
you
at
can
10 seconds, so now you're going to have to stay for at least one more segment. We'll be back here shortly, and we'll continue our
They
discussion
love
with
me.
Lorelei.
What time
Another
is it?
6-hour meeting.
What time is it? What time is it?
And welcome back to the Thursday evening edition of Ridgecrest Talk. I don't know what segment this is, but let's say that it's
I'm getting ready to order
it's-
lunch.
It's segment 5 of a 20-part. No, we've just had such a great time talking with Lorelei Oviatt that I've convinced her to continue discussing with us this.
You like those long meetings, huh?
Yeah, I was
And
in
I'm
my
a veteran
element
of them.
yesterday. Yeah.
That's right.
Anyway, we were talking about the possibility of a well moratorium, the possibility of it being essentially administrative process, one that is slanted towards the primary concept being preventing new significant ag wells, but at the same time not crippling current ag in case they had some kind of problem relative to their wells.
Right.
So that maybe even they could drill a new well if they had one that was no longer servicing them, and it made sense to drill a new well than to repair the old one. But they could assure you that the amount of water they're using is not going to be increased dramatically. Obviously, if they were having troubles, maybe it would have to increase some in order to make sure that they got water to their
And I hope that you at least take a look at Don Decker when he spoke about a well ordinance that
He
his group
did.
had come up with.
Yeah,
Now,
his
you might
ordinance-
not all of it be
his-
applicable,
Yeah,
but
his ordinance is a little bit different, and it talks about them having to do a water supply assessment and
Right.
determine how much water that is and would they be beneficial. See, that makes it again.
you start
We
getting
can
into
do
the
that. You
CEQA.
can have
No,
public
please,
hearings.
Please,
No,
no.
no.
We
Makes
can-
it very
and-
draconian, in my opinion.
Well,
What I was
and-
getting is some aspects of it
No,
might
and
be.
I agree. I agree. And we want to look at what Pastors Robles did. You know, they did kind of they did a well moratorium that was once again kind of a, let's be careful what we're doing here. So I think I can assure you that the board's referral was, we want to carefully look at this, right?
Yep.
Yes.
And so that's, our direction to staff is never, okay, well, there it is. Our direction to staff is, look, let's bring forward a lot of different thoughts here, and county council will weigh in on what we're doing, and then your board can pick and choose based on the public comments what fits what you're thinking, because I'm still not clear completely what they're thinking.
True.
The May 13th was, we set that up as kind of a let's hear from the public, let's hear from Lorelei. I want to understand this plan. I want to understand the community's opposition to it and their support for it. It was like a fact briefing for the board.
Right.
And then I wanted them to give me some feedback. Well, they certainly did. Oh, yeah, and by the way, can you bring a well moratorium? What a great idea,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So
You got 3 days.
so
what the heck.
I'll leap into action. I'm leaping right now. And so it did exactly what we wanted. The community laid out for the board. I thought they had a great representation of all the different sides and all the different issues. They came up with this idea. So on the 19th, we will bring forward this, and we may already, when this airs, brought forward this idea of how to do that well moratorium.
Or at least a discussion of it.
That's right. It'll be a discussion.
Yeah.
And then they can tell us if they want to move forward, and there'll be more hearings. There'll be more hearings. And it could be tailored just for the Indian Wells Valley.
Okay.
And
That's good to hear, because I didn't think there would be a way to do that.
yes, they can absolutely do that.
All right.
And make the findings. And then the Groundwater Management Sustainability Agency and the law is actually a team with, over here, the representative delegated by the board was Supervisor Gleason. In the valley, it's Supervisor Couch. So they're the ones that have been delegated by the board to work with this groundwater legislation. Nothing can happen until everything comes back to the full board to form an agency. We've hired 2 water consultants, one out here, Tim Parker out here, and Florin Core, who is a hydrologist and water manager for the valley portion. They've hired a water attorney, and I can't remember his name. The county has retained a water attorney.
Good
and
move.
so there is this ongoing conversation of how is that agency going to be formed, because the legislation clearly says that the people who can be on the agency are people who have land use authority or people who manage water. So it's not hey, we'll have a citizen representative on there, or we're going to let the Chamber of Commerce be on there. So that limits it to the city of Ridgecrest.
So a well organization
Cannot be on there. The legislation does create an advisory committee, and we have already said, and the supervisor has committed, that there would be some sort of advisory organization, maybe put together by, like the Groundwater Cooperative Management Group. The legislation was very clear. The actual agency itself, however it's put together, can be people who have land management. So in this basin, that's Inyo County, San Bernardino County, Kern County, and by extension, the federal, BLM, and the DOD. And then water management is the Inyo Kern Water District and the Indian Wells Valley Water District.
Well,
and the city
as was
I put the
mentioned
city of
last
Ridgecrest
night,
in there, right?
right,
Okay.
and as was mentioned last night, it's another layer of government which
Yes,
we need to get away from.
that's right. And,
But,
and I want to remind,
And unelected layer.
well, they could be elected officials that were elected that are representatives on there.
Yeah, because that was discussed at the ad hoc water meeting.
Right.
That there could be people elected to serve on the groundwater.
If you
management
created it as a
sustainability.
separate, but yeah, if you created it as a new kind of agency. But what I meant by elected is right now it's a representative from the board of Inyo County, it's a representative from the board of San Bernardino County, a representative from the
Right,
board of
as
Supervisors.
opposed to
We're
some-
all elected.
All elected, that's
Not
right.
hey, the staff's going to go.
Right.
The other thing I wanted to be clear about, in case people have forgotten, is the board voted no. The board sent a very strong letter to the legislature telling them no on this groundwater sustainability legislation.
Good.
Because even though we supported local control, this has a lot of bells and whistles in it, such as the fact that the state has to approve the plan. The state's going to come in if you don't get a plan. We did manage to get a CEQA exemption in there, which was very, very important. That CEQA
Yes.
exemption for the plan was not in there, and we said you're never going to get a plan. By the time you fund an EIR and you go through the whole process and the litigation starts, we'll all be out of water.
Right.
So
Right.
can you at least give us a little relief from the regulation? So anyway, so that's Supervisor Gleason, and so in the CAO's office, Alan Christensen is the new deputy CAO who's in charge of managing all this water stuff. So we think we have a water team put together. I am on the team, but just an advisor right now. I've got enough on my plate in the planning side.
Well,
so-
Robert and I, since February, have learned more about water than we ever thought we would.
Exactly.
Ever wanted to.
Never wanted to know,
Yeah,
except that you turn on the tap and it comes out.
That's right. That's all I want to know. Just like my chickens come from Albertsons.
That's correct.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for us tonight, I think.
Yes.
Is it?
Yes.
Okay. Phew. Join us again here on Thursday night Ridgecrest Talk.